Path of the Midnight Sun is a game with a pretty interesting history behind it. Before the game was officially released on PC in January 2023, the game had its humble beginnings as a ROM hack of Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones on the Game Boy Advance back in 2012 by Alfred Carmon. This ROM hack, titled Fire Emblem Midnight Sun, followed the story of Lady Faratras Hoikade, the vassal of the Demon King, alongside her mysterious rescuer Helios, who had saved her from being captured by her own country, who believed that she had allowed the Demon King to manifest and take over her body. In reality, Faratras had only been defending herself from soldiers who had been brainwashed to kill her. The ROM hack was ultimately cancelled, but in 2019 Alfred Carmon launched a successful Kickstarter campaign to rework the game into an original RPG with visual novel elements through his company Studio Daimon, and this game is what we're going to be looking at with this review. There will be some late game footage shown out of context, but I will make this as spoiler free as possible. I had also played the game on its standard difficulty. Path of the Midnight Sun has you viewing the events of the story from the viewpoints of multiple characters. The game's prologue puts you in the shoes of Sir Suzaku Oniers, a magic knight as well as the captain of the Holy Swords from the Theocracy of Pylam. Suzaku suddenly collapses and is woken up by his companion Shiori LeBlanc, a blind priestess. Suzaku has lost his memories and has no idea who he is and what he's supposed to be doing, though he is plagued by visions and migraines. After being attacked by wild animals and bandits, Suzaku and Shiori are able to successfully fend them off and continue their quest to find the vassal of the Demon King, an individual who has the Demon King sealed within their body, as the Demon King's immortality prevents him from being killed permanently. The game then shifts to the viewpoint of Lady Faratras of Hoikade, said vassal of the Demon King, as she goes about her daily tasks, talking to her subjects, and training with her master Alvano in order to strengthen herself so that she can keep the Demon King in check. To keep things brief, an attack from a cult forces Suzaku and Shiori to part ways, while Faratras is falsely accused of succumbing to the Demon King after she is forced to kill brainwashed soldiers, much like in the original ROM hack. Aiding Faratras is the mysterious Helios, a hooded figure well versed in the art of swordsmanship. While escaping from the forces of Hoikade, Faratras and Helios encounter Suzaku in the nearby forest, and they join up to repel the pursuing soldiers with the help of Princess Rhea of the neighbouring country of Magnolia, and her retainer Kristoff arriving shortly afterwards. Faratras decides to go to Magnolia to get help in escaping from her pursuers, and the adventure truly begins. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. The changes to gameplay I thought were quite interesting, and they've certainly challenged my approach. Normally I like to spend time looking at everything and making sure I'm able to do as much as I can before proceeding. However, time is not always your friend in this game, and a lot of the objectives require you to meet up with characters or complete the stage before a certain time. During the investigation sections of the game, it becomes a point and click, and you can inspect things at your own pace. If you have Lukos, the wealth-sniffing dwarf wolf, with you, you might be able to find extra items or money when inspecting things. Moving to a new area or interacting with certain things will take time, and if you miss the deadline, the person you're meeting with might be angry with you. If you miss the deadline during the game's combat section, that's a different story. You'll generally get a game over. The game has its own battle system as opposed to following Fire Emblems. While you still move spaces on a map, each time you move it will use up time. If you land on a space with a gathering or investigation point, it will cost you time to check it. If you or an enemy land on the same space, the game changes to traditional turn-based combat, and each round will take up time. When on the map, you and your enemies take turns moving, and the turns are dictated by a time limit. So for example, you might get 20 minutes to a turn, which you can use to move around, fight enemies, rest to recover health, or investigate. If you exceed those 20 minutes, you'll have less time on your next turn, and if you spend too much time doing things, you could lose your whole next turn. Depending on the space you move to or are on, certain spots may help or hinder your party, like affecting your accuracy or taking damage if attacked on that space, for example, and these rules apply to the enemy too. The game has a very interesting approach on magic too. Characters generate mana each turn, and mana can be used to cast spells. Characters also have skills which might require health instead of mana as a cost. At the end of battle, everyone's mana is cleared, so it doesn't carry over from battle to battle unless you're fighting multiple waves of enemies at a time. This ties into another mechanic later on where you can use that mana that gets depleted at the end of battle to develop your party's skills, spells and abilities. As your party continues their adventures, they might meet new characters who will join up, and I appreciate this game's approach to unit management. Unlike Fire Emblem, where each character that joins up is someone that you can control in battle, Path of the Midnight Sun has 6 main party members. Everyone else outside of those 6 join up as support characters or adjutants. Adjutants have active and passive skills that can help your main party in battle or on the map, and you can have up to 4 adjutants assigned to your party at any one time. I found this to be an acceptable answer to unit management, as you only need to really focus on your main party and who to assign as active support characters. Your adjutants don't gain levels and are purely there to help you with their active and passive skills. The game also has an affection, hunger and sanity system. With affection, certain choices you make when talking to characters might change their opinion of you, and some of this is noted in dialogue. Sanity and hunger play a part in a character's performance. Choices made in-game can affect sanity, and characters will naturally get hungry over time. This can affect how accurate your attacks are, how much mana you generate a turn, and how much damage your characters can do, and you can get your characters to eat food as an option in the game's menu to keep their hunger levels and sanity in check. I was pleasantly surprised by how much there is to the gameplay mechanics, and the time limits certainly impacted my decisions on whether it's worth taking out all of the enemies for experience and mana to level up and develop my characters. I found the game's story was pretty solid too. As you proceed through the story, you will experience it from the viewpoints of multiple characters, with the main viewpoints being from Suzaku, Shiori and Faratras. The game also makes it very clear which character you are viewing the events of the story through by announcing whose viewpoint it is beforehand. The game did have a couple of moments where it did subvert my expectations, and I thought this was quite refreshing, with one of them being very early in the game. I did like the idea of the story being viewed from the perspectives of different characters, as this also helps with character development, which I found this game also does an excellent job with. As you unravel the story, the characters' insecurities and problems become more apparent, and I really appreciate how everyone grows to help each other out, turning what was originally a mission to help Faratras escape the forces of Hoikade to an adventure with lifelong friends, and I grew to find the characters endearing, quirks and all. While there were parts of the story that subverted my expectations, there were some obvious revelations too, and they didn't go out of the way to force the story into making it some big twist, so it felt a little more natural, which is good. The game also features voice acting for some of its lines, which I think complements it well. The voices all suited the characters, and they play well off each other too, which works in its favour. I do apologise if I'm being a little vague about the story, but I think it's something you need to experience should you choose to pick up the game. The game's art, music and presentation I also liked too. The game makes use of live 2D for characters and their cut-ins, which is pretty neat, and this also extends to creatures and enemies too. The environmental artwork looks good too, and I was a pretty big fan of the character designs. The one that really stands out amongst them all is Shiori, and this also carries over to a part of the game from her perspective, as you aren't able to see anything on the account of her being blind, and having to rely on her special ability to figure out where people are. The game's music was quite enjoyable too. The unique tracks for each character's theme as well as locations complement the artwork perfectly, and it was an absolute treat to listen to. The game has several battle themes, which keeps things nice and fresh too. I found the game's UI to be quite tidy and didn't have any particular problems with it. That doesn't mean I didn't find any problems with the game though, so let's look at what I didn't like in the bad. While I did like how the game challenged my typical approach with its time management, I felt that combat can drag on, and finishing battles quickly can ultimately affect character growth. What I mean by this is that a round of combat equates to 5 minutes. The more turns you take, the closer you get to your deadline. However, the more turns you take, the more potential mana you'll have left over for you to invest in your characters, so you need to strike a good balance on whether you finish a battle fast to save time but not have as much mana, or take your time and risk failing and possibly having to repeat the map to maximise growth. You aren't able to grind in the game due to the time management mechanics, so these choices really need to be made in the heat of the moment as things develop. Also, there's a special place in hell for enemies that use wide guard, especially in late game or in situations where you can't afford to have your battles drag on. Enemies on the map can also join forces to ruin your day, so you may even have to deal with multiple waves of enemies in a single encounter. I don't mind spending multiple turns having to defeat enemies, as that's part and parcel of an RPG, but when you can lose the chapter because you're taking too long dealing with enemies that can tank your hits and inflict you with various status ailments under the sun, putting you on the defensive, I can understand the frustration. In saying that, normal difficulty was pretty reasonable, and there were a couple of situations where I've survived by the skin of my teeth, which I found pretty satisfying. The only thing I would nitpick on are the rest spaces. I understand the mechanic around them, but what you can also do is rest in the spot that you're on in increments of 5 minutes, with the more time you spend resting, the more health your party will recover. Some spaces may even let you forage and search for items on them, and if I can do things like that, why can't I have my characters eat food or use items while resting for 10 minutes? It's no different from doing it on a dedicated rest space, which you may sometimes have to go out of your way to reach, and it also helps you prepare for the next battle. I just think it's a little bit silly, and to be fair, I'm nitpicking at this point. I don't have much else to complain about, so let's move on to the opinion. Path of the Midnight Sun is a pretty ambitious game, and I did enjoy the 35 hours I spent with it, though a portion of that was due to a recording issue on my end because at the time of this review, the game seemed to have a conflict with overlays which included the methods I usually use to record. But this wouldn't have any bearing on someone just playing the game. Technical issues aside, the game's anywhere from 20 to 30 hours long depending on difficulty and how thorough you are. The gameplay did challenge the way I typically approach RPGs with its time management mechanic, and I did like the blend of visual novel, point and click, strategy and turn-based combat, though the turn-based combat can drag on a bit. I really enjoyed the story and characters, and it's definitely clear that there was a lot of care in planning out the plot of the game, as the story beats were present in the Fire Emblem romhack that this game originated from. The development team did an excellent job with this, and it's always really cool to see a game go from a romhack into a fully fleshed out game, and I look forward to your next game. If you can put up with the sluggish combat, and if you enjoy games such as Fire Emblem or even played the original romhack, then I think this game is worth picking up. The story alone was enough to keep me going and trying to figure out what would happen next. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Path of the Midnight Sun Lucas out of 10. You can also pet Lucas when you're at camp, by the way, so that's a +2. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to like, comment and subscribe for more. You can check out our other videos or follow us on X, Instagram and Facebook. Once again, thank you for watching.